It's great to be here with all of you, and I was trying to remember when I first met Amber, and I honestly don't remember, but I have all of the Christmas cards that she sent me over the years, and I was telling someone that because of the pandemic, I hadn't been back in the office since March of 2020, so I had got several Christmas cards all at once, so it was really nice to see the growth of her kids over time. But I'm an epilepsy program director at NINDS, so I oversee grants on sort of all aspects of the genetic epilepsies in particular. And so today what I'm going to try to do is just give you an overview of all of the kinds of research that's supported by NINDS. So at NINDS, we have three divisions: the Division of Clinical Research, Division of Neuroscience, which supports primarily basic research, and the Division of Translational Research. And we really work across all the divisions. So if there's a clinical research study that comes in, I'll partner with that on a genetic epilepsy. I'll partner with our friends and our colleagues in the clinical division, and we work together very collaboratively across all of these divisions. So currently there's 2 grants that are being supported by NINDS on SLC 6A1, grant to Chris McGraw, who's in Boston developing a zebrafish model, and a grant to Dr. Kang, who's here at Vanderbilt on her work, as she recently, just this little while ago, described to you. So at NIH, we have funding mechanisms that span everything from very early pre-bac, or individuals, which are institutional grants or grants to an institution that support individuals who have undergraduates who are doing research, all the way to senior scientist awards and everything in between. And so what you need to do as you're looking at applying to grants for a grant from NIH is really determine where are you in your career stage and what is the right grant for you. And that's really where we as program directors can help you with that journey at NIH, and I'll talk about that as I go through these slides. So there are many different basic science mechanisms, as I said, all the way from fellowship awards, which are for undergrads, graduate students, postdocs, career development awards, which are primarily for clinician scientists. The K99R00 is for both clinical scientists as well as PhD bench scientists, which allows a fellow to complete a couple of years, continue years of their postdoctoral fellowship, and then move into a faculty position. And then there are more substantial grants or research awards, an R21 that's an exploratory grant, a 2-year grant, where you really aren't required to have preliminary data, but it's really helpful if you do. And I think one of the benefits that this community has is the tremendous resources that Connect has really developed with the iPSC cells. So you're not coming in with a grant to develop those resources, but to characterize and to really begin to study underlying mechanisms. So that's really a benefit, I think, that you have, that you should utilize and think about coming into NIH with exploratory grants for your research. A more substantial grant, once you have substantial preliminary data, is an R01. We have an R35 grant that's really for more senior investigators, where they can really fund a large body of their work in their lab. There's a new mechanism, RM1, and I'll come back to that, as well as a program project grant. So this is a new mechanism, then we're just in the first round of this year, that's bringing together teams to do science. So what we find is that there, in the R01 space, that grant mechanism, we were seeing a lot of multi-PI grants. So what that means is typically a grant comes in from one investigator, but then they will also often have several co-investigators and collaborators. But we were we're seeing more and more grants come in where there's 2 or more investigators who are the principal investigators. So a team of scientists working together, because not everyone can know every technique that you need to answer a question. And so we developed this grant mechanism to really support that kind of team science, where people are coming in, working together to really address really transformative, important questions in neuroscience. We also have an emphasis on diversity and funding for individuals who come from diverse perspectives. And this is not just racial or ethnic diversity, but individuals who come from impoverished backgrounds, people who come from other kinds of different perspectives. And so this is a new mechanism that NIH, NIMH, and NINDS recently put out to support individuals that come from these kinds of diverse perspectives to really help to bolster the diverse perspective in the neuroscience workforce. So we have many different grant mechanisms on translational research, and they're all listed here on the left, and I hope these slides will be available to everyone at a later time, or these are on, if you go to the NINDS website, these are all listed there. But these are grant mechanisms that are in place to provide support for everything from biomarker development and validation, to development and characterization of small molecules, to utilize devices to study and develop devices for treatment of epilepsies and other neurological disorders, as well as gene therapy. And there's a relatively new program called URGENT, the Ultra-Rare Gene-Based Therapy Network, that is now in place, and I think is also just in its first round of applications and review. And this is a unique program similar to what we call our Blueprint Neurotherapeutics program, which is for development of compounds or small molecules, where if an investigator has a gene therapy that they are interested in developing, they submit the application, and then what you're provided with is a whole team of consultants and CROs who help you to do whatever part of the research your lab can't do. So you as the investigator can carry out the experiments that your lab has the capacity to do, but you're really provided with this whole team of consultants to help you through this process to develop and characterize a gene therapy that can then, from that point, go into clinical trials. So it's really the hope that this will really help to accelerate this development by providing these kinds of resources to individuals developing therapies. So moving on to clinical trial grant mechanisms, NINDS has what we call NeuroNext, which is a network of institutions who are set up as the sites to carry out clinical trials, but what they're waiting for is investigators to come in with the ideas and the scientific rationale to complete a clinical trial. So the way it works is an investigator submits an application to NINDS. We determine whether or not it would be a good fit to be carried out in the NeuroNext network. And you can utilize the network and add additional sites, so you're not wedded to just using NeuroNext clinical sites. But what it does is provides that infrastructure for carrying out a clinical trial without having to set that up at multiple sites yourself as part of your study. There's exploratory clinical trials, and typical clinical trials typically just come in through the regular R01 grant mechanism that allows individuals to submit clinical trial ideas through the regular R01 mechanism. So NIH has a policy that any grant that is requesting a budget over $500,000 per year, which any clinical trial is going to be that expensive, has to come in through a pre-approval process. And what that also provides is the ability for the investigators to come in with a pre-proposal that really lays out the scientific rationale for the study. What are your clinical endpoints? What's your protocol? What's your inclusion and exclusion criteria? Who will you include in the study or not? Who's not going to be eligible? A budget, how will you do your statistics? And there's a lot of discussion and advice that comes with that pre-proposal. So it then goes to an internal review, but by the time it gets to that internal review, that investigator's been working with a team of us, program directors. I'm a basic neuroscientist, so I bring in my clinical colleagues to help with those discussions. And by the time it goes to our committee for discussion and review, it's pretty certain that you're going to be approved to come in with the full application. And so that's what we're there for, is to really help you through that process to be successful in coming in with a clinical trial application. So my closing word of advice is contact your program directors. Contact us if you have any interest in submitting a grant application to NIH. What we are there for is to really help you guide you through the process, everything at every stage, from pre-application through the application process in review, and then following review to help you to understand the summary statement that you receive, to then tell you about the process if it's likely you're going to be funded, to help you through the process if you're likely not to be funded and will need to submit a revised application. But my colleague, George Umana, is here with me, and I have my contact information here. And contact either one of us. We're happy to help you through this process. The other thing we do is if you contact us and what you're proposing is really not within our wheelhouse and our expertise, we'll guide you to the appropriate program director for you to contact and talk with to help you through the process. So that's our job. We're here for customer service. We're here to help. And someone was asking me the other day what % of grants that get assigned to me are approved. And I said, well, typically every grant cycle, and there's 3 a year, there's 60 grants that are assigned to me. Of those, about 30 are actually discussed in study sections, so only about 50% of grants that get submitted are discussed in any study section. And anywhere from 5 to 10 of those grants get funded per cycle. So it's an incredibly competitive process, but I would love it if everyone contacted me before you submit. We can help you to be as competitive as possible, and I would love if 100% of grants assigned to me are reviewed well and get funded. And so again, please contact us. George and I will be here through lunch. We have to go to the SYNGAP 1 meeting this afternoon, but it's been my pleasure to be here to learn from all of you, both the families and from the scientists. So thank you very much.